The forced exodus, the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Sovereignty Alliance floated in the neutral zone between three major star systems, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of distant suns. Inside this monument to galactic civilization, representatives from 23 different species had gathered for what many considered the most important vote in recent history. The air recycling systems worked overtime, filtering the various atmospheric requirements of beings who had evolved under different stars, on different worlds, with different dreams. Ambassador Alina Vasquez stood alone at the center of the vast chamber, her simple blue diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes, natural armor, and technological augmentations worn by the alien delegates surrounding her. At 38, she had represented humanity in dozens of trade, negotiations, and diplomatic conferences, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The weight of 4 billion human lives rested on her shoulders, and the faces looking down at her from the tiered seating showed little sympathy. High Chancellor Vexther of the Dominion Coalition raised his forearms for silence. His exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's artificial lighting as he spoke through his species' natural vocal cords, producing sounds that the universal translators converted into standard galactic speech. His words carried the authority of someone who had never been denied anything he truly wanted. The evidence before this assembly is overwhelming and undeniable, Vexther announced, his voice echoing through the chamber with mechanical precision. Humanity has proven itself incapable of coexisting peacefully within our civilized society. Time and again, they have chosen violence when diplomacy was available. They have rejected our guidance when wisdom was offered. They have disrupted the natural order that has maintained peace across the galaxy for over 2 millennia. Alina felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her composure. Around the chamber, heads nodded in agreement, tentacles swayed in approval, and various alien anatomies expressed consensus in ways her human brain could barely interpret. She had expected this reaction, but experiencing it firsthand was still painful. The Chancellor continued his address, consulting a holographic display that materialized above his speaking podium. Consider the recent incident on Kepler Prime. Human colonists were offered a reasonable relocation package when the hegemony discovered valuable mineral deposits beneath their settlement. Instead of accepting the generous compensation offered, they chose to fight. 12 hegemony workers died in the resulting conflict. Elena's hands clenched behind her back. The generous compensation had been barely enough to buy passage off-world, let alone establish new homes. The mineral deposits were beneath the children's hospital that had served the colony for 30 years. But she knew better than to interrupt the proceedings with facts that would be dismissed as emotional human rhetoric. Ambassador Krill of the Ethereal Collective rose from her floating meditation pod, her translucent form shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated deep concern. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of a species that had achieved perfect harmony through careful genetic and social engineering over countless generations. The humans demonstrate a fundamental incompatibility with advanced civilization, Krill stated, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Their aggressive instincts, while perhaps useful in their primitive evolutionary past, have no place. In our enlightened society, they cannot be reformed because they do not wish to be reformed. They take pride in their violence and call it strength. More agreement rippled through the assembly. Alina noticed that only 3 delegates remained seated: Elder Korvash of the Ancient Nephthys, Councillor Zenith of the Harmony Worlds, and, surprisingly, Representative Dulak of the Warrior Clans. The rest were already preparing to cast their Votes. Then Elder Corvash stood, his ancient form moving with the careful dignity of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. At over 400 years old, he was the oldest being in the chamber, and his species had been among the first to achieve interstellar flight. When he spoke, even those who disagreed with him listened out of respect for his vast experience. "Honored colleagues," Corvash began, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone, "I fear we are about to make a decision that will be remembered as one of the greatest mistakes in galactic history. Yes, humans are different from us. Yes, they are more aggressive than we find comfortable. But these traits that we condemn today may be the very qualities that save us tomorrow." Vexter's exoskeleton clicked with irritation. "Elder Corvash, surely you cannot defend humanity's repeated acts of violence against peaceful citizens." The ancient being turned his luminous eyes toward the Chancellor. "I do not defend their violence, but I understand its source. Humans fight, not because they love destruction, but because they refuse to accept injustice. They resist not because they reject peace, but because they will not compromise their core values for the sake of convenience." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. "More importantly, I have lived long enough to remember the last time our galaxy faced an existential threat. The Void Reapers nearly consumed everything we had built, and our advanced technology, our superior wisdom, our civilized restraint meant nothing against their hunger. Do you know what finally stopped them?" The chamber grew quiet. The Void Reaper War was ancient history, a catastrophe so complete that most modern species knew it only from historical records. "Species like humanity stopped them," Corvash continued. "Beings who refused to surrender when defeat seemed certain. Warriors who fought with such ferocity that even the Reapers learned to fear them. We have grown soft in our prosperity, comfortable in our peace. If such a threat returns, we will need allies who remember how to fight impossible odds and win." "Ambassador." Krill's bioluminescence shifted to patterns of polite dismissal. "Elder Corvash, with respect, the Void Reapers were destroyed 5,000 years ago. We live in a different era now, one built on cooperation and mutual understanding. Humanity's warlike nature is a relic of a barbaric past, not a tool for a civilized future." "Perhaps," Corvash replied sadly, "but I fear you are condemning us, all to discover which of us is correct." The vote began immediately after his warning. Alina watched as species after species raised their various appendages, activated their voting crystals, or signaled their decision through whatever method their biology allowed. The Dominion Coalition voted first, their decision inevitable. The Ethereal Collective followed, their choice made clear by their earlier statements. The Hegemony, the Trade Federation, the Crystal Mines, the Symmetry Alliance all voted in favor of exile. When the count was complete, the numbers appeared in holographic displays around the chamber: 20 votes in favor of exile, 3 abstentions, 0 votes against. Alina felt something cold settle in her stomach as the reality of the decision sank in. High Chancellor Vexter stood to deliver the formal sentence. "By the authority vested in this assembly by the Galactic Sovereignty Alliance Charter, humanity is hereby declared incompatible with civilized society. All human colonies, settlements, and installations within Alliance space must be evacuated within 6 standard months. Any human vessels found in Alliance territory after that deadline will be destroyed without warning." Alina stepped forward, her voice steady despite the enormity of what was happening. "And where exactly are we supposed to go, Chancellor? You're exiling 4 billion people from every habitable system in known space. That is not our concern, Vexter replied with mechanical indifference. The galaxy is vast. Find somewhere else to exist, preferably far from civilized species who wish to live in peace. As the session ended and the delegates began filing out, Elder Korvash approached Elena's position at the center of the chamber. His security escorts maintained a respectful distance, allowing him to speak privately with the human ambassador. "Where will your people go?" he asked quietly. Elena looked up at the viewing windows that showed the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, human families were going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire civilization had just been sentenced to exile. "The Omega Nebula," she said finally. "It's the only region of space the Alliance has never claimed. Too dangerous, too unstable for normal colonization." Korvash nodded slowly, his ancient eyes reflecting knowledge gathered over centuries of life. The energy fields in that region are unlike anything in normal space. Few species could survive there, even with advanced technology. "We'll survive," Elena said with quiet certainty. "We always do." "Yes," Korvash replied, studying her face with those luminous eyes. "I believe you will. And when you return, because I know you will return, the galaxy may not be prepared for what you've become." He walked away without explanation, leaving Elena alone in the vast chamber. Outside the windows, human ships were already gathering, responding to emergency signals that had been transmitted the moment the vote concluded. Colony ships, military vessels, research stations, civilian transports, all converging on a rallying point at the edge of Alliance space. Captain Marcus Chen commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from the bridge of the UN's determination, a massive vessel that had been converted from a colony ship into a mobile command center. The ship's main viewer showed hundreds of human vessels stretching away in all directions, a refugee armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Final count, Captain," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Jennifer Park, 4.2 million people across 317 vessels. We've managed to salvage most of our essential equipment and supplies, but we're going to be running on minimal rations for the first few months. Marcus nodded grimly. At 52, he had commanded merchant fleets, military expeditions, and exploration missions, but never anything like this exodus. Every decision he made would affect the survival of his entire species. Status on the nebula approach. He asked his navigator, Commander David Torres. Long-range sensors show increased energy activity along the outer boundaries, Torres replied, consulting his displays. "Whatever's causing it, it's unlike anything in our databases. The nebula seems to be alive in some way, pulsing with patterns that almost look intentional." Dr. Sarah Kim, the fleet's chief scientist, looked up from her mobile laboratory station. "Captain, I've been analyzing the sensor data we collected during our preliminary surveys. The energy signatures coming from the nebula are extraordinary. They're not following any known physical laws. It's as if space itself works differently in there." Marcus studied the tactical display showing their destination. The Omega Nebula was a massive cloud of exotic matter and energy that stretched across dozens of light years. No Alliance vessel had ever penetrated more than a few light years into its boundaries, before being forced to retreat due to equipment failures and navigational impossibilities. "How long until we reach the outer edge?" he asked. 3 weeks at our current speed," Torres answered. "But Captain, once we enter the nebula, there's no guarantee we'll be able to maintain communications between ships. The energy interference is unlike anything we've encountered. Then we'd better make sure everyone knows the plan before we go in, Marcus said. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing that his words would reach every human ship in the Armada. This is Captain Chen to all vessels. In 3 weeks, we will enter the Omega Nebula and begin the most challenging phase of our journey. We don't know what we'll find in there, but we do know one thing. We're going to survive. We're going to build new homes, new lives, and a new future for humanity. The Alliance thinks they've seen the last of us, but they're wrong. This isn't an ending. This is a beginning. As the fleet changed course toward their distant destination, Alina transmitted one final message back toward Alliance space. It was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species would hear humanity's parting words. This is Ambassador Alina Vasquez, speaking for all of humanity as we depart the civilized galaxy. We go not in defeat, but in determination. You have cast us out because you fear what we represent, but you have made a fundamental error. You assume that removing us will make you safer, but you have only ensured that when danger comes it will come you will face it without allies, who know how to fight for survival. We take with us our technology, our courage, and our memory. Remember this day, because your children will ask why you chose fear over cooperation, and you will have no good answer to give them. The transmission ended, and the human fleet continued its journey toward the unknown. Behind them, the lights of civilization grew smaller and dimmer until they disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the swirling energies of the Omega Nebula, a place where no rational species would choose to live. But humans had never been entirely rational, and that would make all the difference. The reckoning 8 years had passed since humanity disappeared into the Omega Nebula, and the galaxy had settled into a comfortable routine. Trade flowed smoothly between Alliance worlds, disputes were resolved through proper diplomatic channels, and the peace that had been disrupted by human aggression was restored. Most species had forgotten about the exiled humans entirely, dismissing them as a primitive aberration that had been corrected by civilized intervention. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Outer Rim territories, where automated monitoring stations began detecting unusual energy signatures moving through empty space. The readings were dismissed as equipment malfunctions until entire star systems started going dark. Admiral Thane Mordok of the Alliance Defense Force stood in the tactical center of the military headquarters on Concord Prime, studying reports. That made no sense, according to everything he knew about warfare and physics. At 63, he had commanded fleets through countless minor conflicts and peacekeeping operations, but nothing had prepared him for what he was seeing. "Show me the Keller system again," he ordered his aide, Colonel Vryn Tessick. The holographic display materialized above the strategy table, showing what remained of a star system that had housed 12 billion beings just 72 hours earlier. Where planets should have been, there was only empty space. Where a star should have burned, there was a void that seemed to bend light around its edges. The attacking force consumed everything, Tessick reported, his voice carefully controlled despite the horror of what he was describing. Not destroyed, not occupied, consumed. They absorbed the matter and energy of entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but distorted space. Mordok studied the tactical projection, his mind struggling to accept what his eyes were showing him. "What do we know about the attackers?" "Very little, sir. They appear to be some form of collective intelligence that exists partially outside normal space-time. Our analysts are calling them the Swarm because they move in coordinated groups that act with perfect unity. Their technology allows them to convert any form of matter or energy into more of themselves. The Admiral moved to the communications console, where reports from across the galaxy continued to stream in. The hegemony had lost 6 systems in the past week. The ethereal collective's core worlds were under direct assault. Even the mighty Dominion coalition was evacuating their outer territories as the swarm advanced toward their capital systems. Casualties? Mordok asked, though he dreaded the answer. Conservative estimates put the death toll at over 50 billion and rising, Tesek replied. Every military force we've sent against them has been completely destroyed. The enemy seems to learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics faster than we can develop countermeasures. High Chancellor, Vexter entered the tactical center, his usual mechanical composure replaced by something approaching panic. His 4 arms gestured frantically as he spoke, a display of emotion that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Admiral, what is our strategic assessment? He demanded. How long can we hold the core systems? Mordok looked at the projection showing the swarm's advance. Red markers indicated confirmed enemy positions, while yellow zones showed systems that had gone silent and were presumed lost. The pattern was clear and terrifying. At their current rate of expansion, they'll reach the core systems within 6 months, he admitted. Our conventional forces are completely ineffective against them. They absorb our energy weapons, adapt to our tactics, and convert our destroyed ships into more of themselves. Vexter's exoskeleton clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Then we need unconventional solutions. What about the ancient weapon systems? The reality manipulation devices from the Void Reaper War? Destroyed or lost millennia ago? Mordok replied, the species that built them chose to eliminate such dangerous technology after the war ended. They believed correctly, as it turned out that such weapons were too dangerous to preserve. Then what do you suggest, Admiral? That we simply surrender our entire civilization to these creatures? Before Mordok could answer, an ancient voice spoke from the chamber's entrance. Perhaps it is time to seek help from allies we foolishly cast aside. Elder Korvash entered the tactical center slowly, his great age evident in every careful step. Behind him walked other beings who rarely left their home systems. Counselor, Zenith, of the Harmony Worlds, and Representative, Dulak of the Warrior Clans. All 3 had been among the few who abstained from the vote to exile humanity 8 years earlier. Vexter's voice carried obvious irritation. Elder Korvash, this is a military briefing, not a philosophical debate. We need practical solutions, not lectures about decisions made years ago. The ancient being moved to the holographic display, studying the swarm's advanced pattern with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. Tell me, Chancellor, do your practical solutions appear to be working? Silence fell over the tactical center as everyone contemplated the obvious answer. 50 billion dead, entire star systems consumed, and an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. The Alliance's practical solutions had proven catastrophically inadequate. Korvash turned to address Admiral Mordok directly. Where are the humans now? Intelligence reports suggest they entered the Omega Nebula and haven't been seen since. Mordok replied, most analysts assume they died in the energy storms or were destroyed by the nebula's unstable physics. And if they survived, Korvash pressed, if 8 years in that hostile environment has changed them in ways we cannot imagine. Representative Dulak stepped forward, his scarred warrior's frame bearing the marks of countless battles. His species, the Kreks, were among the few remaining cultures that still valued martial prowess over diplomatic solutions. The humans were already the most adaptable species we had encountered, Dulac said in his gravelly voice. If any beings could survive in the Omega Nebula, it would be them. And if they have survived, they would have been forged by conditions that make normal space seem comfortable by comparison. Thexter's mechanical precision cracked slightly, revealing the desperation beneath. Even if humans somehow survived in the nebula, why would they help us? We exiled them. We cast them out of civilized space because we feared their violence. Because, Corvash said quietly, despite everything we did to them, they are still human, and humans, for all their flaws, do not abandon those in need when the stakes are survival itself. Admiral Mordok studied the tactical display one more time, calculating odds and alternatives. Every conventional option led to the same conclusion: total defeat within months, possibly weeks. The swarm was simply too powerful, too adaptable, too alien for normal military tactics to be effective. If we're going to contact the humans, he said finally, someone needs to go into the nebula and find them. Our long-range communications can't penetrate the energy interference, and we have no idea what conditions are like in there after 8 years. I'll go, Corvash said immediately. Elder, you're over 400 years old, Mordak protested. The journey alone could kill you, and we don't know what the nebula environment will do to normal physiology, which is precisely why I must go, the ancient being replied. If the humans have changed as much as I suspect, they will need to see someone they recognize, someone who spoke for them when the rest of us chose fear over wisdom. 3 days later, a small Alliance vessel approached the edge of the Omega Nebula. The ship carried Elder Corvash, a minimal crew, and technology specifically modified to function in the nebula's exotic energy environment. As they crossed the boundary between normal space and the swirling energies of the nebula, their instruments began registering readings that defied conventional physics. Elder were detecting massive structures ahead, reported the ship's captain, a young Vortani named Keshrel. They appear to be artificial, but the energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Through the ship's main viewer, Corvash saw something that took his ancient breath away. Floating in the swirling energies of the nebula were constructions that seemed to be built from crystallized energy itself. Ships moved between them with impossible grace, their hulls gleaming with patterns that hurt to look at directly. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Source appears to be ... everywhere at once. The viewer shimmered and cleared, revealing a face that was recognizably human but changed in subtle ways. The woman looking back at them had the same basic features as the humans Corvash remembered, but her eyes held depths that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, and her skin had a faint luminescence that suggested energy flowing just beneath the surface. This is Commander Lisa Park of the Terran Nebula Fleet, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated strangely in the ship's atmosphere. Elder Corvash, we've been expecting you. Expecting me? Corvash asked, surprised. The nebula shows us many things, Park replied with a smile that held mysteries Corvash couldn't fathom. We know about the swarm. We know about the devastation they've brought to Alliance space. We know why you've come. Then you'll help us. Park's expression grew serious, and for a moment, something ancient and powerful looked out through her transformed human eyes. That depends on what you're willing to accept in return. We are not the same species you exiled 8 years ago. The nebula has changed us, evolved us, made us something more than human. We have become what we needed to become to survive in this place, "Show me," Corvash said simply. The screen switched to an external view showing Park's ship approaching, the Alliance vessel. What Corvash saw challenged his understanding of both technology and biology. The human ship seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its hull phases between solid matter and pure energy. When it docked with their vessel, the connection was made not through mechanical airlocks, but through some form of controlled space-time manipulation. Commander Park stepped through what should have been a solid bulkhead, her form briefly becoming translucent before solidifying again. She moved with fluid grace that suggested perfect control over her physical environment, and when she spoke, her words seemed to bypass normal hearing and communicate directly with the listener's consciousness. "Welcome to our new reality, Elder Corvash," she said. 8 years ago, you warned the Alliance that they were making a mistake. You understood that humanity's greatest strength was not our technology or our numbers, but our ability to adapt to impossible circumstances. She gestured, and the ship's walls became transparent, revealing the vast nebula cities stretching away in all directions. Millions of humans moved through structures that defied physics, their bodies adapted to exist in an environment of pure energy and exotic matter. The nebula didn't just shelter us, Park continued. It transformed us. We learned to metabolize energy directly from space itself. We developed the ability to manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. We became something the swarm has never encountered before. And the price of this evolution, Corvash asked, recognizing that such transformations always came with costs. Park's expression grew thoughtful. We are no longer entirely human in the way the Alliance understands humanity. We exist partially outside normal space-time, which means we can never truly return to the lives we once had. But we are, still recognizably ourselves, still driven by the values and principles that defined us before the exile. Admiral Mordak's voice crackled through the communication system. "Elder, the swarm has accelerated their advance. We're receiving reports of attacks on the hegemony core worlds. Time is running out." Park nodded, her transformed senses apparently able to detect the transmission despite the nebula's interference. "We know. We've been monitoring their progress through quantum resonance patterns. The swarm believes they have found a galaxy defenseless against their hunger. They are about to discover how wrong they are." She turned back to Corvash, and he saw something in her eyes that was both utterly human and completely alien. "We will help you stop the swarm, but on our conditions. First, humanity will never again be subject to exile or persecution by the Alliance. Second, the systems we liberate will be open to human settlement and development. Third, the Alliance will formally acknowledge that diversity of thought and approach strengthens rather than weakens galactic civilization. And if the Alliance refuses these conditions, Park's smile was gentle but implacable, then we will stop the swarm anyway, because that is who we are. But when the threat is ended, we will remember who chose cooperation and who chose prejudice, even in the face of extinction. Elder Corvash studied the transformed human before him, seeing both the species he had tried to defend 8 years ago, and something entirely new that had emerged from the crucible of exile and adaptation. "I will present your conditions to the Alliance leadership. But tell me, Commander, do you believe we can actually win against the swarm?" Park's form briefly became translucent again, and for a moment, Corvash could see energy patterns flowing through her like living light. "Elder, the swarm consumes matter and energy to grow stronger. They have never encountered a species that exists partially outside the physical universe. They are about to learn that some forms of evolution create powers they cannot absorb or adapt to. She gestured again, and the view shifted to show human ships emerging from the nebula's depths. They moved like living creatures, their hulls shifting between states of matter as they prepared for battle. Each vessel carried thousands of transformed humans whose consciousness could operate across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Alliance cast us out because they feared our capacity for violence, Park said as the fleet formed around them. They were right to fear it, but wrong about its purpose. We do not fight for conquest or glory. We fight for survival, for justice, and for the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. The swarm is about to discover what 8 years of adaptation in the most hostile environment in the galaxy has created. As the combined fleet moved toward the galaxy's edge, Elder Corvash felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. The humans had indeed evolved beyond anything the Alliance could have imagined, but they had retained the essential qualities that made them human. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when a species that refused to surrender met an enemy that had never known defeat. The swarm had consumed 50 billion lives and dozens of star systems, growing stronger with each victory, but they had never faced humanity, and they had never encountered beings who had learned to exist in the space between dimensions. The reckoning was about to begin, and the galaxy would learn whether the Alliance's greatest mistake had become their only hope for survival.